us about what Empires of the Deep is.
Yes.
Okay, well, it's a pretty exciting project that has been taking place here in China. It's the first all-English-made movie of its size that's ever been made in China. It is also the biggest budget movie that's ever been made in China. It's over 100 million US.
This is really, really special for me to be filming this here.
I'm very excited about it.
So what did actually happen?
They lied about at least half of it, if not more.
They said it was the biggest soundstage in the world at the time.
It didn't really show at first that it was going to be one of the worst productions in the world.
Everybody was getting frustrated because nothing was happening.
We have no script, but we have props. It didn't make any sense. And I heard that the two other partners, one was dead, the other one was in jail.
And then you throw in like a temperamental billionaire who has this like unrealistic vision, and it was kind of a recipe for disaster.
No, I'm the man. I want this. No, you do this.
You're here to sign the contracts. Word of advice, protect yourselves.
We're not going to let you leave the country.
Go and contact the local police, get ourselves out of there, and come to one of the American embassies.
It just didn't work out for anybody involved. Like, nobody came out of Empires better.
Alright, so the year is 2007. China is experiencing a major box office boom and is quickly becoming a significant player in the global film industry. Not only are more movies being made, but more people are watching them on the big screen, and as a result, the demand is skyrocketing.
At that time, everybody thought the next big IP from Asia is going to come from China. And it's going to make a lot of money in China, and it's going to make a lot of money in the West. So it was a really exciting time to be working in the film industry there.
That is Sam Voutas, an Australian actor, writer and director who spent much of his career in China and would later land a role in Empires of the Deep.
I was living in Beijing at the time, and I'd started hearing rumors that there was going to be a epic fantasy that was going to be shot in Beijing. So I was immediately interested and started asking around, and it would seem there'd been a lot of rumors. People had heard about it, but what exactly it was, nobody was sure.
This mysterious new project was masterminded by Jiang, a Chinese billionaire who'd made much of his fortune in the real estate market. As cinephile, he claims to have seen over 4,000 movies during his lifetime, and now, after spending years on coming up with an epic story of his own, it was time to make it happen.
I remember thinking that this type of movie is very unusual for China, and investing in this type of movie is highly unusual, because typically in China you'll have, investors will make a mainstream movie for the Chinese market, or there might be a propaganda movie that's made, or people will make small art house movies. But the idea of a investor putting their money into something that is of this scale was pretty unprecedented.
To say he was ambitious with it would be an understatement. He idolized directors like Spielberg, Jackson and Lucas, and just like them, he wanted to create a blockbuster that would become a global sensation. A blockbuster that he envisioned as the next big thing, leading to merchandise, video games and even a theme park. He was on a mission to prove that a big Hollywood-style movie could be made in China, and he wanted to do it with Chinese crew, but in English, with Western actors and a Western director. So, despite the fact that he had never made a movie before, he put his money where his mouth is and gave the project an estimated budget of $100 million.
Yeah, I remember at the time a lot of people were talking about it being like the next Avatar, like the Chinese Avatar.
It was supposed to be a trilogy, so this was going to be the first of the three.
And I was like, wow, okay, this is going to be pretty big.
That's Pierre, Irena and Max, who would all end up playing some of the bigger characters in the movie. But before they show up on set a few years later, Jiang had to find the right people to bring his vision to life. His first course of action was to hire Randall Frakes, a screenwriter who, among other things, had worked with James Cameron on the Terminator franchise. His task was to take the draft of the story that Jiang had written and turn it into a proper Hollywood script. The problem, however, was that it was a total mess. For one, it seemed like it was basically a Star Wars/Indiana Jones ripoff, but with mermaids, and then it was really hard to read as it appeared to be a robotic translation from Chinese to English. To make matters worse, the two of them would often bump heads with each other as Jiang was fiercely protective of his story. And it was actually during one of those creative debates that one of my favorite moments took place, when Jiang simply stopped arguing, took Randall Frakes to the parking garage, and showed him his Lamborghini. I gotta say, this has to be one of the best ways to win an argument. Like, you may think my YouTube videos are bad, but what about now?
Sir, if you don't leave, I'm gonna have to call security.
Go! Around the same time, Jiang had also approached Irvin Kershner, the director of The Empire Strikes Back, who got attached to the project, but just like Randall Frakes, had some serious issues with the story. The only way the two of them were going to do it was if they were allowed to make some significant changes to the plot, but since Jiang was never going to agree, they both decided to walk away. So, back to square one, and in need of a new director, he met with a few potential candidates, with one of them being Pitof, a French director who specialized in VFX.
The guy, John, came to see me with his right arm, Harrison, who speaks English. John didn't speak a word of English. And so the guy first came with this booklets with all these visuals, hundreds of visuals. Some were bad, some were fine, a few of them can be really interesting. And I said, you know what, let's try it.
Only 10 days after the meeting, Pitof would arrive in Beijing and be given a royal treatment. Dinners, gifts, nice apartment, the whole shebang. But just like those before him, it wouldn't take long before he got to experience the notorious Jiang's stubbornness.
When we talk about the DP, I said, you know what, in the plane I watched this movie and I love the DP. I would love to work with this guy because he can really bring something incredible. John said, okay, I will find for you. And one day, so he said, I brought the DP for you. And so, okay, great. So I meet the guy, young guy. And then after the meeting, I talked to John and said, John, is that the DP? I don't think so. And John, yeah. He did the movie. I can prove it to you. I have the DVD and I'll show it to you. And so he played the DVD for me. And the guy was a camera operator, not a DP. So, and I said to John, no, the guy is not a DP. The guy is a camera operator. Yeah, but look at the director is talking to him all the time, and he's directing him, so he's a DP. No. The DP is look at this old guy with this black thing. You know, he's the DP. He's the one who is behind the light. No. The guy's an old guy. He's blind. I want this guy who has a camera. The movie is made with a camera, not with kind of old guy. No, it doesn't work like that, John.
So, you're at pre-production. You're looking at locations, props, sets, but what about the script? Was it at all finished at that point?
The thing was unreadable. It didn't make any sense. And at some point, I told John, you know what? We need a writer. We need somebody I can work with to write and to do something really amazing. So I flew back to LA did a bunch of meetings and to find a writer. And I found a guy, very nice guy, Michael O'Brien. And after a while, we got the first draft. So now the drafts have to be translated in Chinese, which takes some time. And then John started to read the script and say, I hate it. My script was 10 times better. So fix it.
Spoiler alert, they did not fix it. After spending a whole year in there and never getting past pre-production, Pitof's contract had expired, and since the company was not willing to comply with DGA standards upon renewal, he had no choice but to walk away, leaving Jiang once again on the lookout for a new director. His search led him to Jonathan Lawrence, with whom he'd actually met before, but let's just say that initial meeting did not go well. And by the way, he is aware of this video and was invited for an interview, but I was told he had moved on, which I fully respect. And he's not the only one either. Someone else from the crew that I'll keep anonymous flat out said that Empires of the Deep was such a mess that they wouldn't want anything to do with that. So yeah, things were about to go downhill fast. But before it turned south, Jonathan Lawrence had cast most of the actors and everyone arrived in China filled with excitement.
I was impressed. I was like, whoa man, this must what the Avengers or like the Marvel actors feel like when they get on set and there's all this stuff. like whole cities built and stuff like that.
I just remember very vividly just a sense of excitement and optimism just from everybody on the crew in those when production started.
The first day we went to meet the big producer, he appeared very welcoming. He just wanted us to just be happy, you know, that we're there. And, you know, I think we got some food there and everything looked great. And maybe because he knew things were going to change and he wanted us to actually be happy there so that we're, you know, we don't get the idea too early and split.
And every day we went eating, also, of course, all together. Of course, John was paying everything, of course, and giving us gifts whenever he could. One day we went to a Gap store, and he bought clothes for us. Pick whatever you want. No, the guy was, you know, was very, very, I mean, very nice. Kind of some darkness. But very sweet, very nice.
This duality of Jiang is at the core of the story, and we'll be diving deeper. But for now, as soon as the honeymoon phase was over, reality began to set in. They had technically started production, but the script was still nowhere near finished. Jonathan had spent his entire flight to Beijing working on it, and he would constantly try to fix it as they're filming it.
Parts of it didn't tie in with others. It didn't really make sense overall.
It was more like storyline stuff that didn't make sense. So like there was like this magic pill that just brought people back to life. So death was inconsequential. And then the language didn't match up correctly. So I was like, I'm going to start editing my own lines to make it sound better. So I was like adding words, taking out full sentences, stuff that didn't matter. It didn't matter to me. I was just a sidekick, yeah.
So, what is the movie about?
I still don't know what the story is about, really, to this day. And I've read the script many times.
You know, it's kind of like Avatar.
Kind of a Star Wars, but underwater.
A Greek tragedy.
The demon maid.
Monsters.
Warrior mermaid.
Giant battle between
Pillars
mermen
that look
and
like seashells. A giant, like, Acropolis type.
It's the story of a man living in ancient Greece who finds out that his father has been kidnapped by underwater sea creatures. And he then first tries to get the help of the city to help him get his father back. But when the city refuses, he and a friend embark on a journey into the depths of the sea to try to get his father back.
Oh, okay. Let's just say the story was very creative and very ambitious. There is no denying that Jiang was swinging for the fences and everyone was trying to make it work. But inevitably, it always came down to what he wanted, regardless if it made sense or not. And ultimately, this mix of stubbornness and complete lack of experience began to take a toll on the production.
He was very bossy and he was telling people what to do, people whose job it is to know what it is they have to do. He was telling them how to do their job when he had no clue.
20 days into shooting, or, you know, a couple months into shooting, he was like, we're shooting it in 3D now.
And that's not how Peter Jackson would shoot his, you know, Lord of the Rings and everything. And that was his biggest idol. And he wanted to do things exactly as Peter did.
I do distinctly remember that when he did step on set, the mood automatically became a bit more serious because everybody on the team knew that the boss is here. We're all here because of him. Because
of that, the tension kept building up. People were getting frustrated with each other and things were constantly going wrong. On-set accidents, miscommunication, low safety standards, disorganization, bad living conditions, and some shady practices to name a few. More on that later. Pretty much everyone I spoke to had plenty of stories, and eventually, as this house of cards was on the verge of collapse, money became an issue as well.
CFG, China Film Group, they show up, they lock the studio, and they say, you can't film today because you haven't paid us. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, you know, this is a huge budget film. Just pay the taxes or pay the fee or pay the rental or pay whatever you got to pay. And, that would take like a week out of shooting. They're like, oh, we're not going to shoot this week. Why? Well, China Film Group showed up and locked all the studios. So it's like, oh, okay.
Rumors began to spread that since Jiang had already spent a massive amount of money without having much to show for it, the once deep pockets were becoming dangerously shallow. Payments to cast and crew were getting postponed until eventually halted, and when a group of foreign extras tried to complain about not getting paid, someone had sent the police to their hotel to check on their visas and act as a scare tactic, or in other words, to intimidate them and keep them quiet. At that point, the production had moved to a remote mountain area far away from the big city, and Jiang was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he would have someone trusted to monitor the set, report to him directly, and communicate back his orders. All of that, in combination with a series of setbacks, had brought people to their absolute limits, and some of them wanted to quit. But as it turns out, quitting may have not necessarily been an option.
The situation had become really uncomfortable by this point. The crew was really unhappy because they weren't getting paid. Everything was just going backwards. It was, upside down. It was not at all what people agreed to, and no changes were being made. We were in the middle of nowhere, and I had it. At this point, I said, you know what, I'm done. I want to go home. I'm done with this whole adventure. And at that point, the next move was to ask production to get us the passports, give us the passports back, and book us a flight within 24 hours and get us back into the US. And not to my surprise at that point, nobody was answering. So here we are at the hotel, calling, and nobody is picking up. So we arranged with one of the drivers to take the bus and go speak with the police in that small town, the beach town that we had been prior. And I remember I got into the minibus with my assistant. My boyfriend was there and the driver, and my assistant called production during this drive and talked to them. And all of a sudden I see the driver turn the bus around and bringing us back to the hotel. So we asked what's going on, and he said, well, production decided that you're not allowed to go to the small town either. And at this point, we started wondering what to do. And we called the American Embassy. And we spoke with somebody, and he told us that what we needed to do was to get ourselves out of there and come to one of the American embassies. So this is what Jonathan, our director, helped us with. Basically what he did, he called everybody, crew and everybody that was on the hallways towards the front of the hotel, and to have some sort of meeting to talk about something. And meanwhile, we were going to sneak out at the back of the hotel through a window in the back. And we ended up actually going into the riverbed and walking through the riverbed with everything that we had. And we were going to try to cross the river so that we can go on that small path that was winding like a really long road in this foresty area and try to just get out of sight and start walking from there. So what we had to do was to go really, really, really slow and duck. Luckily, there were some weeds, there were some big rocks. The river was pretty big. The water actually wasn't very deep. It came up to our knees or so, but it was really cold, and it was, December, and it was really fast. So we needed to be very careful not to slip and fall. And the first thing we did after we got out of sight was we changed our boots and our socks to dry stuff because we were completely soaked. And we kept going for about 6 hours. Around 6 hours, we reached a curvature of the road and we heard barking. And then we saw those dogs just charging at us. Really big, really long fur and stuff. Mountain dogs. They were attacking us. They were running towards us, and they were coming real strong and coming closer and backing off and coming closer. So at this point, oh my God, we did not know what to do. So we had to stop. We looked around for some sticks, trying to throw stuff to kind of yell at them to back off. But they were getting more and more courageous, and they were, coming closer and coming closer. So we got scared. We ended up sitting on our suitcases, and we called our guy at the embassy, and we told him, look, we're completely stuck. We don't know what to do. Can you please just, find somebody to send to come pick us up, like a taxi or anybody from Fuding that would be willing to come pick us up. And I remember that night was extremely, to just make matters worse, extremely foggy. In fact, it became so foggy that it was really like you could barely see in front of you. So we ended up waiting there for about a half an hour, waving the sticks, keeping the dogs at a distance. And during which time our guy at the embassy managed to find a driver out of, I don't know how many he had called, that basically said, we don't know the area. It's, in the mountains there, it's really foggy. We don't want to risk it. So he found this one guy that accepted to come pick us up, and he said he knew the area, and he agreed to come to our rescue. So I was just imagining the worst, right? It's like the guy is driving, and from time to time he has to stop the car and get out and make sure that we're still on the road, looking around. And I was just like, oh my God, please God, just get us in one piece to Fuding, please, please. I don't want to end up on the bottom of the mountain or something. To cut the story short, we ended up getting into Fuding around 4 o'clock in the morning, and we asked to be taken to the police station. At 8 a.m. the police station opened, and there were 3 embassies at this point that were collaborating to try to find a solution to get us out. To fast forward, we get to Shanghai, and we get in touch with the embassy there because we didn't have passports. And I remember the embassy issuing us passports within an hour. And when we got into the airplane, I ended up sending Jonathan a formal text announcing him that we had left and we are about to take off. And yeah, that's that, basically. We had agreed since our departure from the hotel and this entire escape experience to not text him, just in case they were going to check phones, and to make sure that they didn't know that he was part of helping us, get out of there, because it wouldn't have been good for him. He was going to still stay there and shoot more, and he's a director, so that we didn't create problems for him.
Yeah, that is quite the story. I spoke to Irena for an hour and a half, as well as collecting almost 5 hours of interviews. So it's safe to say that a lot has happened during that production, and by now it was completely falling apart.
I just kind of saw how production was spiraling, and I'm not getting paid. I haven't gotten paid in a month. And I was just like, if you pay me, I'll stay and I'll finish the film, no problem. But like, they weren't answering me about anything. So one day I just got in a cab and went to the airport and left. I didn't tell anybody I was leaving. I just ghosted.
As this whole thing was happening, Jonathan Lawrence was still trying to hold it together, but despite it being his dream and trying his best, it proved an impossible uphill battle. So after 5 long months, he returned to the United States, leaving the production for the 4th time on the lookout for a new director. Next in line was the Canadian filmmaker Michael French, who had mostly done comedies, but since he had already directed a movie in China once, he thought he could try and salvage the situation.
So I arrive on set, and the first day there, we had hundreds of people on set. That day it was like 15 people around, and you go like, really?
Despite all the setbacks, however, Jiang still wanted to portray an image of a production doing something that the world had never seen before. So around that time, he held a press conference to show off some of the footage, and among the remaining cast and crew, a special guest was the newly added big star of the movie, Olga Kurilenko, who was reportedly promised $1 million for her role and came straight from the James Bond movie Quantum of Solace. The media got to check out the sets and of course preview the footage in 3D, but by all accounts, what they saw was far from impressive.
To me, it looked like rough video game footage, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, like this is like the 3D rendering or 3D modeling before they put, the skin on it and they smooth it over.
I'm sorry to say, but it didn't look good. By
the end of April 2010, Michael French's contract had expired, which meant that the production was once again on the lookout for a new director. 5th time's the charm. Next up was Scott Miller, who vastly improved the mood on set, but was not a fan of the existing footage, so what he wanted to do was to completely refilm everything from scratch. Yeah, that idea got turned down. Speaking of which though, when you change so many directors, you're bound to give a movie an identity crisis. They all saw it differently. Jonathan Lawrence, for example, had envisioned it as an epic family adventure, while for Michael French, it was more of a campy comedy, and to Scott Miller, it needed more focus on the love story and emotion.
Each director had a different take on my character, So I went from like sort of like the lovable drunk to sort of more like the Weasley rogue.
Eventually, in late 2010, they finally wrapped up production, with the budget reportedly going up to $130 million. But whether that's true or not is a different story. Nonetheless though, a lot of money was spent, and the plan was to release it in 2011, but lo and behold, that did not happen. The thing is, Empires of the Deep was going to be a very CGI heavy movie. Jiang was doing it independently, without a studio behind him, and to make it even more complicated, he wanted to build his own in-house VFX team to work on the effects, which is of course very time-consuming and very expensive. In 2012, a new trailer appeared online, and in an effort to secure a distribution deal, Jiang attended the American Film Market Industry Gathering, where all the big producers are going. By the sound of it, however, no one was really interested, except perhaps an old familiar face.
I was at AFM, which is like a big deal, where everyone goes to sell their like films or like get budgets to shoot their films. It's all just buyers and sellers, and I walk into the main gallery, like the main entrance of the hotel, and there's this huge poster, like, I don't know, 20 feet tall, that said Empires of the Deep. And on every pamphlet, which would tell you what room Fox is in, all this stuff, the front cover was Empires of the Deep. And I was like, whoa, like that costs a lot of money for that level of advertising. I was like, well, I might as well go say hi. You know, right? Like, no hard feelings. I left at the tail end of your film. So I was looking around for them. I couldn't find them. I thought they'd be in like the biggest room there, a ballroom or something like that. No, they were in the basement of the Lowe's Hotel, where you had to like go down this way and around a corner and past this elevator. Like it was sad. And it was Jiang, one of his translators, Scott Miller's wife, who was in charge of marketing at the time. And I came in and said hi to everybody, and they gave me a bunch of promotional materials and a DVD of the trailer. And I'm like, I can't afford to buy your film. But, you know, I said hi to everybody, and, he didn't swing at me or anything like that.
In the following years, Jiang was still clearly trying to make something happen. In 2013, the movie was supposed to be at the Cannes Film Festival, but for whatever reason, that got cancelled. And in 2014, he screened a version of the movie to potential distributors in LA, but that went nowhere either. So at the very least, we know that some version of the movie exists somewhere in the world, and one of the very few people who have seen it is Steve Politis, the actor who played the main hero Atwas. But apparently, he wasn't very impressed. Quick update, as I am editing this video that you're hopefully enjoying, I couldn't help but keep digging, and don't ask me how, but I managed to find an actual scene from Empires of the Deep. Unreleased scene. Well, I guess the whole movie is unreleased, but a scene nonetheless, and it is unfinished, but at the very least, what it can do is to give us a little bit of a taste of what it could have been like. So, check it out. In 2016, Jiang launched a crowdfunding campaign to help release the movie, but that didn't work out either, as they only raised about $7,600 out of their $150,000 goal. At this point, you may think that Jiang would simply give up, but no, he was just as ambitious as ever, telling a reporter that he wanted it to look as good as Star Wars, and the production was waiting for more investment money.
He was like adamant that it was still coming out. He had a final cut. He had shown to some people.
That is Mitch Moxley, the actual journalist who interviewed him back in 2015 and wrote a fantastic article about the whole debacle.
He was a very wealthy man in China at a time where it was like a pretty cutthroat environment. And I don't think you would get that wealthy in China around that time without being somewhat cutthroat. And, I think he was probably just bringing to the movie what he brought to his businesses and, probably made him quite successful there.
Something I keep wondering is, was Empires of the Deep doomed from the start?
That's a really good question. I do think it was doomed from the beginning, because of Jiang, because the issues that would sort of plague the movie, like, him kind of micromanaging and having this like kind of unrealistic vision for it. People had mixed experiences with him, but everybody agreed that he really wanted this to be great. Like he wasn't just kind of winging it for vanity. Like he had invested years and millions of dollars into this. And so like his heart was in the right place, but there was some kind of like character flaw with him where he couldn't just let go and let other people try to achieve his vision. He kept kind of stepping in and then making matters worse.
I don't think he's a bad dude, like I never felt threatened or in danger or anything like that. I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of his anger.
He had this kind of kid thing. He sees the world only through his eyes. So the only thing that counts is how he sees things. He's way too much hands-on. He doesn't want to give anything to anybody. That's his vision, his things, and he's the guy. And he wants to be the guy.
So, while we can never know for sure if there were any bad intentions from the get-go, I do think that Jiang might have simply been someone who is a big dreamer and bit off far more than he could chew. And as for everyone else, now when more than a decade has passed and they've had some time to process, I wanted to hear some of those thoughts.
It was still a great experience, even though the movie never made it. It's still something that I keep in my heart, because those memories, they're here for good.
So yeah, it was a very strange experience, and I've made lifelong friends from this experience, and that's one of the most beautiful things that came out of it. It made us bond and form some really beautiful friendships, and I'm grateful for that part.
To me, Empires of the Deep is a story about ambition. It actually reminded me of a documentary I saw recently called American Movie. It's about this guy who is dead broke, but more than anything in life he wants to make a movie. And he tries, he really tries, but everything goes wrong, and in a way, it's the exact same situation, just on a completely different scale. And going back to Empires of the Deep, knowing what it went into making it, I guess there's nothing else left to say other than I really want to see it.
I want to see it. I definitely want to see it. Do I want it to be released?
That would be interesting to watch it, yeah.